The sky above Kepler 442c turned an angry shade of purple as the electromagnetic storm rolled across the horizon. Hyun-Woo Kim pressed his face against the thick glass window of the medical facility and watched the lightning dance between the clouds. The bolts were not normal lightning. They glowed with an eerie blue light that made the hair on his arms stand up even through the protective walls. Hyun-Woo had been working at the remote mining colony for 3 years now. He served as both the xenobiologist and the chief medic for the small outpost of 200 humans. Most days were quiet. The miners would come in with cuts and bruises. Sometimes someone would catch a fever from the strange plants that grew near the mineral deposits. Tonight was different. The storm had been building for hours. The communication array had failed first. Then the main power grid started fluctuating. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down the empty corridors as Hyun-Woo made his rounds through. The medical wing. He checked the backup generators twice. The medical equipment hummed softly in the darkness. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The wind howled like a living thing. Hyun-Woo had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The electromagnetic pulses were so strong they made the metal walls of the building vibrate. Every few minutes, a bright flash would illuminate the compound, like daylight before plunging everything back into purple darkness. Hyun-Woo was reviewing patient files on his tablet when he heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. It was deep and rumbling like thunder, but it came from the ground level. He looked up from his work and listened carefully. The sound came again. This time he was sure it was not the weather. He grabbed his emergency kit and a portable scanner. The sound was coming from outside the main entrance. Hyun-Woo knew he should call security, but the communication system was down. He made his way through the darkened corridors alone. His footsteps echoed against the metal walls. The main entrance had thick blast doors designed to protect against the harsh environment of the planet. Hyun-Woo checked the external cameras, but they showed only static from the electromagnetic interference. He pressed his ear to the door and heard the sound again. It was closer now. Something large was moving outside. Against his better judgment, Hyun-Woo opened the viewing port. The storm hit his face like a physical blow. The air was thick with charged particles that made his skin tingle. Through the swirling chaos, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A massive creature lay collapsed near the entrance. It was unlike anything in the colonial database. The being was roughly 15 feet long with scales that shimmered even in the dim emergency lighting. Its body was serpentine, but it had 4 powerful legs and wings that were folded against its back. Most striking of all was its head. It looked like the dragons from old Earth stories. The creature was clearly in distress. Its breathing was labored and shallow. Strange crystalline growths protruded from between its scales. The crystals glowed with the same eerie light as the lightning above. Some kind of mineral poisoning, Hyun-Woo realized. The creature's internal. Temperature had to be dangerously high. Hyun-Woo had studied enough xenobiology to recognize the basic signs. This was a Velcaran, the proud dragon-like species that ruled the Outer Rim territories. They were known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence and their fierce independence. They were also known for their hostility toward humans. For 50 years, the Velcarans and humans had maintained an uneasy Cold War. There had been no direct conflicts, but both species viewed each other with deep suspicion. Velcarans saw humans as weak and primitive. Humans saw Velcarans as arrogant and dangerous. Contact between the two species was rare and usually ended badly. Now, one of these legendary beings was dying outside his medical facility. The creature stirred as if sensing his presence. One massive eye opened and fixed on Hyun-Woo through the viewing port. The eye was golden with vertical pupils like a cat. Intelligence burned in that gaze. This was no simple animal. This was a thinking being with hopes and fears and dreams, just like any human. The creature tried to lift its head, but the effort seemed to exhaust it. The eye closed again, and its breathing became even more shallow. Hyun-woo could see its life, fading with each labored breath. He should have walked away. Every regulation in the colonial handbook said to avoid contact with unknown alien species. Every piece of military training told him that Velkarans were the enemy. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed that this was dangerous. Instead, Hyun-woo found himself thinking about his oath as a medic. He had sworn to help any being that was sick or injured regardless of species. He thought about his grandmother back on Earth, who had always told him that kindness was the most important thing in the universe. She would have helped without question. The storm raged around the fallen creature. Rain mixed with charged particles fell like liquid fire. If Hyun-woo left the Velkaran outside, it would be dead within the hour. The mineral poisoning was spreading through its system. The crystalline growths were getting larger. Hyun-woo made his decision. He sealed his environmental suit and opened the blast doors. The storm hit him like a wall of sound and fury. The electromagnetic pulses made his suit systems flicker and spark. He could barely see 3 feet in front of his face. The Velkaran was even more massive up close. Its scales were beautiful despite the corruption of the crystal growths. Each scale was perfectly formed and colored deep emerald green. The creature's breathing was so faint, Hyun-woo had to press his ear close to its chest to hear it. Getting the creature inside would be impossible alone. Hyun-woo ran back into the facility and activated every loading drone he could find. The automated systems were barely functional due to the electromagnetic interference, but he managed to get 3 units online. Working together, the drones slowly dragged the unconscious Velkaran through the blast doors and into the medical bay. Hyun-woo had to rearrange all the equipment to make room for the massive patient. He set up monitoring equipment and tried to get baseline readings. The creature's vital signs were all wrong by human standards, but Hyun-woo had enough training to recognize the patterns. High internal temperature, irregular breathing, accelerated heart rate. All signs of severe systemic poisoning. As he worked, the storm continued to rage outside. The lights flickered constantly. Emergency power was holding, but barely. Hyun-woo realized he was completely cut off from the rest of the colony. No communications, no backup, just him and a dying alien dragon that most humans would consider their mortal enemy. The Velkaran's eye opened again. This time there was recognition in that golden gaze. The creature was aware of where it was and who had helped it. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the vast gulf of species and history. Then the creature's eye closed again, and Hyun-woo got back to work. He had a patient to save. Dawn came slowly through the thick clouds that still covered the sky. The electromagnetic storm had weakened, but the rain continued to fall in heavy sheets against the medical facility windows. Hyun-woo had not slept all night. He sat beside the massive Velkaran, watching the steady rise and fall of its chest. The creature he now knew was female had been unconscious for 6 hours. Her breathing was still labored, and the crystalline growths on her scales continued to spread. Hyun-woo had tried every standard treatment in the colonial medical database. Nothing worked. The alien physiology was too different from anything he had studied. The blast doors to the medical bay opened with a sharp hiss. Bo-Ram Lee stepped inside, followed by Tae-min Park. Bo-Ram was the colony administrator, and she looked furious. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled from the storm, and her clothes were wrinkled from sleeping in the emergency shelter. "What is that thing doing in my medical facility?" Bo-Ram demanded. She pointed at the Velkaran as if it were a dangerous piece of equipment that had been left running. "Her name is Nuri," Hyun-woo said quietly. He had found identification markings on the creature's harness during the night. "She is dying from mineral poisoning. I brought her inside to help her." Tae-min Park stepped closer to examine the alien. He was the colony security chief, and his hand rested on his weapon. "Are you insane?" he asked. "This is a Velkaran. They are our enemies. What if this is some kind of trick? Hyun Woo looked up at both of them. His eyes were red from exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "Look at her," he said. "Does she look like she is planning an attack? She can barely breathe." Bo-Ram walked around the medical table, studying the unconscious dragon. The crystalline growths glowed faintly in the dim lighting. "I have read the reports about these creatures," she said. "They consider any help from other species to be an insult. They would rather die than accept our assistance." "Then that is her choice to make when she wakes up," Hyun-Woo replied. "Right now she cannot choose anything. She needs medical help." Tae-min shook his head. "This could bring their entire fleet down on us. When they discover we have one of their people, they will assume we captured her. They will demand her return or declare war." Hyun-Woo had considered this possibility during the long night. The political implications were enormous, but every time he looked at Nuri struggling to breathe, he pushed those thoughts away. "We will explain what happened," he said. "Any reasonable being would understand." "Velkarans are not reasonable," Bo-Ram snapped. "They are proud and arrogant. They have never forgiven humanity for expanding into what they consider their territory." The argument was interrupted by a soft chime from the monitoring equipment. Nuri's vital signs were changing. Her breathing became more rapid and shallow. The crystalline growths on her scales pulsed with brighter light. She was getting worse. Hyun-Woo moved quickly to check the readings. Her internal temperature was climbing to dangerous levels. The mineral poisoning was accelerating. He had maybe 12 hours before permanent organ damage occurred. Maybe less. "We need to move her out of here," Bo-Ram said, watching the frantic activity around the medical table. "Take her back outside. Let her people find her." "She will be dead in an hour if we do that," Hyun-Woo said, without looking up from his instruments. "The storm damaged her ship. That is how she got poisoned by the crystal deposits. There is no one coming to help her." Taemin moved closer to the table. Despite his concerns about security, he was curious about the alien physiology. "What kind of treatment are you considering?" he asked. Hyun-Woo paused in his work. The truth was he had no idea what to do next. Every medical protocol he tried had failed. The Velkaran biology was too alien for standard approaches. Her body was rejecting all the medications he had given her. "The fever is the main problem," he said finally. "Her body temperature is too high for her healing systems to work properly. If I can bring that down, her natural recovery might take over." Bo-Ram looked skeptical. "How do you plan to do that when nothing else has worked?" Hyun-Woo was quiet for a long moment. An idea was forming in his mind, but it seemed too simple, too primitive. He thought about his childhood on Earth, when he would get sick with fever. His grandmother had always made him a special drink to help him feel better. "My grandmother used to make cold syrup when I had fever," he said slowly. "Just simple ingredients, mixed together. Menthol to cool the body, sugar water for energy. Nothing complicated." Taemin stared at him. "You want to treat an advanced alien species with folk medicine. The advanced medicine is not working," Hyun-Woo pointed out. "Maybe something simple will help where complex treatments have failed." Bo-Ram shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I forbid it. We are not going to experiment on this creature with home remedies. The political consequences alone could destroy this colony." Hyun-Woo looked down at Nuri. Her golden eyes had opened slightly and seemed to be looking directly at him. There was pain in that gaze, but also something else. Trust, perhaps. Or maybe just resignation. "She is going to die anyway if we do nothing," he said. "At least this gives her a chance." "And if your folk remedy kills her faster?" Bo-Ram asked. "What then? How do we explain to a Velkaran battle fleet that we poisoned one of their people with primitive human medicine?" The monitoring equipment chimed again. Nuri's temperature continued to rise. The crystalline growths were spreading across more of her scales. Time was running out. Hyun-woo made his decision. He moved to the medical synthesizer and began programming the ingredients. Synthetic menthol, purified water, glucose solution. The same basic recipe his grandmother had used, but made with modern equipment. "I am ordering you to stop," Bo-ram said. Her voice carried the full authority of her position as colony administrator. Hyun-woo continued working. "Then you will have to arrest me," he said calmly. "But I took an oath to help any being that needs medical care. I will not break that oath today." Taemin looked between the administrator and the medic. His duty was to enforce Bo-ram's orders, but something about the situation made him hesitate. The alien was clearly suffering. Maybe the human was right to try something different. The synthesizer finished its work with a soft beep. Hyun-woo held a clear container filled with the cold syrup. It looked like simple sugar water with a faint minty smell, such a basic remedy for such a complex problem. Nuri's eyes tracked his movement as he approached with the medicine. For a moment, their gazes met across the vast differences between their species. Hyun-woo saw intelligence in those golden eyes, understanding, perhaps even gratitude. He administered the cold syrup through a breathing tube that delivered it directly to her respiratory system. The menthol would help cool her body temperature from the inside. The glucose would provide energy for her natural healing processes. Bo-ram and Taemin watched in tense silence. Outside, the rain continued to fall against the windows. The storm was passing, but the real test was just beginning. Nuri's breathing seemed to ease slightly after receiving the medicine. Her temperature readings began to stabilize. It was too early to know if the treatment would work, but for the first time since finding her, Hyun-woo felt a small spark of hope. The three humans stood around the alien dragon, watching and waiting. None of them knew that this simple act of compassion would change the relationship between their species forever. 3 days had passed since Hyun-woo first gave the cold syrup to Nuri. The Velkaran dragon remained unconscious most of the time, but her condition had stabilized. The dangerous fever that nearly killed her was slowly coming down. The crystalline growths on her scales had stopped spreading, though they had not yet begun to shrink. Hyun-woo barely left the medical bay during those 3 days. He caught short naps in the chair beside Nuri's makeshift bed. Every few hours he would prepare a fresh dose of the cold syrup and administer it through the breathing apparatus. The simple remedy seemed to be working, but progress was slow. Da-Yun. Choi had become his constant companion during the vigil. The young communications officer was fascinated by the alien patient. She spent her off-duty hours researching everything the colonial database contained about Velkaran physiology. Most of the information was incomplete or based on old military intelligence reports. "Look at this," Da-Un said excitedly as she showed Hyun-woo her tablet. "I found a research paper from the University of New Seoul. It says that Velkarans have a dual circulatory system, one for regular blood flow and another for temperature regulation." Hyun-woo looked up from checking Nuri's vital signs. The dragon's golden eyes were closed, but her breathing was deeper and more regular than before. "That would explain why the menthol is helping," he said. "It is affecting both systems at the same time." Da-Yun scrolled through more data. The paper also mentions that Velkarans can survive much higher body temperatures than humans. What we consider a dangerous fever might be normal for them during healing. This was encouraging news. It meant that Nuri was not as close to death as Hyun-woo had feared. Her body was fighting the mineral poisoning in its own way. The cold syrup was simply helping that natural process work more efficiently. Sok-jin. Han had quietly joined their small group of caregivers. The maintenance engineer said little, but he had spent the past 2 days modifying the medical bay to better suit their unusual patient. He installed additional environmental controls to regulate temperature and humidity. He built a larger platform to support Nuri's weight more comfortably. The air filtration system needed upgrading anyway, Sok-jin said when Hyun-woo thanked him for the work. This just gave me a good excuse to install the new equipment. Not everyone in the colony was supportive of their efforts. Boram Lee continued to argue that helping the alien was a mistake. She had filed official protests with the colonial authority. On Earth, though, the communication blackout meant the messages could not be sent yet. She visited the medical bay twice each day to check on the situation and express her disapproval. "This is madness," she told Hyan Wu during one of her visits. "When that creature wakes up, she will be furious that we touched her." Velkarons consider medical assistance from other species to be a grave insult. She might attack us out of wounded pride. Hyunwoo continued his work without looking up. "Then we will deal with that problem when it happens," he said. "Right now, she is still recovering." Taemin Park was also a frequent visitor, though his attitude had softened somewhat. The security chief still worried about the political implications, but he was impressed by the dedication of the medical team. He had stationed guards outside the medical bay, but their orders were to protect rather than threaten. "I have been thinking about what you said," Taemin told Hyan Wu on the third evening. "About treating her like any other patient. Maybe you are right. Maybe species should not matter when someone needs help." The breakthrough came during the fourth night. Hyan Wu was dozing in his chair when he heard a soft rustling sound. He opened his eyes to see Nuri lifting her massive head from the medical table. Her golden eyes were fully open and alert. She was truly awake for the first time since the storm. Nuri looked around the medical bay, taking in her surroundings. She saw the human equipment monitoring her vital signs. She saw the modifications that had been made to accommodate her size. She saw Hyan Wu sitting beside her with exhaustion written on his face. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They simply studied each other across the gap between species. Nuri's expression was unreadable, but her eyes held intelligence and awareness. She understood where she was and what had happened. Hyan Wu slowly stood up from his chair. He moved carefully to avoid startling his patient. "Hello, Nuri," he said softly. "My name is Hyun-Woo Kim. You have been very sick, but you are getting better now." Nuri tried to speak, but only managed a harsh whisper. Her throat was dry from days of unconsciousness. Hyan-Woo quickly prepared a bowl of water and held it where she could reach it. After a moment of hesitation, Nuri drank gratefully. "Why?" she finally managed to say. Her voice was deep and resonant, even weakened by illness. "Why did you help me, human?" The question had been asked in perfect English, though heavily accented. Velkarons were known to be excellent linguists, but Hyun-Woo was still surprised. Most humans believed the aliens refused to learn other languages out of pride. "You were dying," Hyun-Woo answered simply. "I am a doctor. Helping sick people is what I do." Nuri's eyes narrowed. "I am not people. I am Velkaron. We are your enemies." "You were sick," Hyun-Woo repeated. "That is all that mattered to me." This seemed to confuse Nuri more than anything else that had happened. She struggled to understand why a human would risk helping a member of a hostile species. In Velkaran culture, such an action would be seen as either foolish weakness or a clever trap. "What do you want from me?" she asked suspiciously. "What is the price for this assistance?" Hyun-Woo sat back down in his chair. He was tired, and the conversation was emotionally draining. "I do not want anything," he said. "I just want you to get well so you can go home." Over the next few hours, Nuri tested this claim repeatedly. She asked about ransom demands. She inquired about information the humans might want about Velkaran military capabilities. She wondered if they expected her to serve them in some way to repay the medical debt. Each time, Hyun-Woo gave the same answer. He wanted nothing except for her to recover fully. The concept was so foreign to Nuri's world view that she began to think the human might be mentally ill. As dawn approached on the fourth day, Da-Yun and Seok-Jin arrived for their morning shift. They were delighted to find Nuri awake and alert. Da-un immediately began asking questions about Velkaran culture and language. Seok-jin quietly checked all the modified equipment to make sure everything was working properly. Nuri watched these interactions with growing bewilderment. The young human female showed genuine curiosity about Velkaran customs without any apparent ulterior motive. The engineer maintained equipment for her comfort without being asked or rewarded. "Your people are strange," Nuri told Hyun-woo when they were alone again. "This behavior makes no sense by Velkaran standards." "Maybe our standards are different," Hyun-woo suggested. "Maybe that is not a bad thing." For the first time since waking up, Nuri seemed to consider this possibility. She had been raised to believe that other species were inherently inferior to Velkarans. Yet these humans had saved her life using knowledge and compassion that her own people might have lacked. The crystalline growths on her scales were visibly smaller now. The mineral poisoning was being defeated by her body's natural healing processes, aided by the simple cold syrup treatment. In a few more days, she would be strong enough to leave if she chose to. But for now, Nuri found herself curious about these strange humans who helped enemies without expecting anything in return. Perhaps there was more to learn here than she had initially thought. Perhaps her people had been wrong about humanity after all. By the 7th day, Nuri was strong enough to sit upright on the modified medical platform. The crystalline growths had shrunk to small patches on her emerald scales. Her breathing was clear, and her golden eyes were bright with returning health. Hyun-woo had reduced the cold syrup treatments to once per day as her body no longer needed the constant temperature regulation. Yoon Seo-nam arrived at the medical facility that morning, carrying a thick folder of protocols and translation guides. As the colony's xenocultural specialist, she had been called in to handle the first formal communication with their Velkaran patient. Yoon Seo was nervous about the assignment. First contact situations were always delicate, and this one had already gone far outside normal procedures. "Good morning, Nuri," Yoon Seo said as she entered the medical bay. She spoke slowly and clearly, using the formal tone recommended for initial alien contact. "I am Yoon Seo-nam. I am here to help facilitate communication between our species." Nuri looked at the woman with amusement. "Your English is quite adequate," she replied, "though your accent suggests you are from the southern regions of your homeworld." Yoon Seo blinked in surprise. She had expected to need the translation equipment. "You speak our language very well," she said. "All educated Velkarans learn multiple languages," Nuri explained. "It is considered a basic skill among our people. We have been monitoring human communications for decades." This revelation made Yoon Seo uncomfortable. The implications for colonial security were significant, but those concerns would have to wait. Her immediate job was to establish proper diplomatic contact and determine Nuri's intentions. "I need to ask you some questions about your presence." "Here," Yoon Seo began. "Are you part of a Velkaran military mission? Were you conducting surveillance on our colony?" Nuri shifted on her platform. The movement was careful as she was still recovering, but it carried an air of dignity that reminded everyone she was a proud member of an advanced species. "I am Wing Commander Nuri of the Exploration Fleet," she said formally. "I was conducting a routine survey of this system when my ship encountered the electromagnetic storm." Jin Ho Kang chose that moment to enter the medical bay. The colony's senior doctor had initially opposed treating the alien patient, but curiosity had finally overcome his reservations. He wanted to see firsthand how the unconventional cold syrup treatment had succeeded where standard medical protocols had failed. "Fascinating," Jin Ho said, as he reviewed Nuri's latest vital signs. "Your recovery rate is remarkable. The mineral poisoning that nearly killed you has been completely eliminated." Nuri watched the human doctor work. "Your colleague tells me that he treated me with a simple folk remedy," she said. "This seems impossible. Velkaran medical science is far more advanced than human techniques." Jinho nodded thoughtfully. That is exactly what makes this case so interesting, he said. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Your friend here proved that basic chemistry can work better than complex medicine if you understand the underlying problem. Hyun-woo felt embarrassed by the attention. I just remembered what my grandmother taught me about treating fevers, he said. It was mostly luck that it worked for Velcaran physiology. No, Nuri said firmly. It was not luck. You observed my symptoms carefully. You identified the core problem. You found a solution that addressed the root cause rather than just the surface effects. That is good medicine by any species standards. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several other colony members. Word had spread that the alien patient was awake and talking. People were curious to see a real Velcaran up close. Most had only heard stories about the proud dragon-like species. Woo Sung-jeon was among the visitors. The 8-year-old boy had come with his mother who worked in the hydroponics lab. While the adults talked about politics and medical procedures, Woo Sung stared at Nuri with open fascination. Are you really a dragon? The boy asked suddenly. The adults tried to shush him, but Nuri seemed amused by the direct question. I am Velcaran, she replied. Your people call us dragons because of our appearance. We call ourselves the children of the stars. Woo Sung stepped closer to the platform. His mother reached out to stop him, but Nuri made a gesture that seemed to indicate the boy was welcome. Can you breathe fire? He asked. Nuri opened her mouth slightly and exhaled. A small puff of warm air shimmered with traces of luminescent particles. It was not fire, but it was impressive enough to make the boy's eyes widen with delight. That is how we regulate our body temperature in cold environments, Nuri explained. The particles help carry heat throughout our respiratory system. Yoon Seo took notes on everything she observed. The interaction between Nuri and the human child was particularly significant. Velcaran attitudes toward young beings would be important for future diplomatic relations. Do you have children of your own? She asked. Nuri's expression became distant. I had a daughter once, she said quietly. She died in the war with the Koreth Empire 3 cycles ago. She was about the same age as this young human. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the ongoing conflicts in the Outer Rim territories. The Velcarans had been fighting multiple wars for decades while trying to maintain their independence from larger galactic powers. Woo Sung seemed to sense the sadness in Nuri's voice. I am sorry about your daughter, he said with the simple sincerity that only children could manage. For the first time since awakening, Nuri's composure cracked slightly. Her golden eyes grew bright with unshed tears. Thank you, little one, she whispered. The emotional moment broke when Bo-Ram Lee arrived with Taemin Park. The colony administrator had been monitoring the situation and was growing more concerned about the security implications of the extended contact. We need to discuss your departure arrangements, Bo-Ram told Nuri without preamble. Our communications are back online. We can contact the Velcaran authorities to arrange for your pickup. Nuri considered this for a moment. That will not be necessary, she said. My ship's emergency beacon will have alerted my fleet to my location. They will send a search party when the ion storms clear from this region. Taemin stepped forward. When do you expect them to arrive? He asked. Within the next few days, Nuri replied. Velcaran rescue protocols are very efficient. This news created mixed reactions among the humans. Some were relieved that their unusual patient would soon be leaving. Others had grown attached to the alien visitor and would be sorry to see her go. Hyun-woo felt conflicted. He was glad that Nuri would be reunited with her own people, but he worried about the reception she would receive. How would her fellow Velcarans react to learning that she had been helped by humans? Will you be in trouble for accepting our assistance? He asked. Nuri was quiet for a long time before answering. Traditionally, yes, she said finally. Accepting help from other species is considered a sign of weakness among my people. But these are not traditional circumstances. She looked around the medical bay at all the humans who had helped save her life. Da-un, with her eager curiosity about alien culture. Seok Jin with his quiet engineering skills. Jin Ho with his scientific interest in unconventional treatments. Young Woo Sung with his innocent acceptance of differences. Perhaps it is time for some traditions to change, Nuri said thoughtfully. Outside the medical facility, the sky was finally clear for the first time since the Great Storm. The electromagnetic disturbances had passed, leaving the air crisp and clean. In a few days, Velkaran ships would appear on the horizon, and everything would change again. But for now, there was peace in the small medical bay, where members of two different species had learned that compassion could bridge even the widest gaps between worlds. 2 weeks had passed since the Great Storm, and Nuri was now fully recovered. The last traces of crystalline growth had disappeared from her scales, leaving them gleaming like polished emeralds. She could have left the medical facility days ago, but she chose to remain in the colony. Her curiosity about human culture had grown stronger with each passing day. Hye Jin-oh had become one of Nuri's most frequent visitors. The botanist brought samples from her greenhouse and explained how humans adapted earth plants to grow in alien soil. Nuri was fascinated by the agricultural techniques and shared knowledge about Velkaran farming methods that used mineral nutrients from asteroid mining. "This is remarkable," Hyajin said, as she examined a data pad that Nuri had filled with botanical information. "Your people have developed techniques we never considered. This symbiotic approach to soil chemistry could revolutionize our food production." Nuri watched the human woman work with plant samples. "Your species has an unusual relationship with growing things," she observed. "Most spacefaring races simply synthesize nutrients artificially. You maintain the old connection to living soil." The conversation was interrupted when Hyan Wu entered the greenhouse laboratory carrying his medical kit. "Time for your final checkup," he announced. "Though I suspect you are healthier now than when I first found you." Nuri allowed him to run the standard tests, even though they both knew she was completely recovered. The ritual had become comfortable. For both of them, it was a chance to talk without the formal protocols that usually governed interspecies communication. "I have been thinking about the treatment you used," Nuri said as Hyun-woo checked her vitals. "The cold syrup that saved my life. I want to understand why it worked when our advanced medicine would have failed." Hyun-woo put away his scanner. "Hye Jin and I have been researching that question," he said. "We think we found the answer." Hye Jin pulled up a molecular diagram on her tablet. "The menthol in your grandmother's recipe contains compounds that are almost identical to a rare mineral found on the Velkaran homeworld," she explained. "Your people call it kelthara. It is used in your traditional healing ceremonies." Nuri's eyes widened with surprise. "Kelthara is sacred to our people," she said. "It is found only in the deepest caves of our homeworld." "How could a human plant contain the same chemistry?" "Convergent evolution," Hyajin replied. "Sometimes completely different worlds develop similar solutions to the same problems. Your people and Earth mint plants both needed cooling compounds for survival." The revelation was stunning. Humans had accidentally discovered through trial and error over thousands of years what Velkarans considered their most precious healing substance. The folk remedy that saved Nuri's life contained the same active ingredients that Velkaran doctors would have used. "This changes everything," Nuri said quietly. "Our medical science overlooked the solution because we focused on complex treatments. Your people found it by paying attention to simple natural patterns." Wu Sangjian chose that moment to burst through the greenhouse door. The energetic boy had become Nuri's constant companion during her recovery. He brought her drawings of earth animals and asked endless questions about life among the stars. "Nuri, look what I made," he shouted excitedly. He held up a paper dragon decorated with green scales and golden eyes. It looked remarkably like his alien friend. Nuri accepted the artwork with grave ceremony. "This is beautiful little star friend," she said, using the Velcaran term of endearment. "I will treasure it always." Wu Sung climbed onto a nearby chair so he could be closer to eye level with the massive alien. "Will you teach me to speak dragon language?" he asked. "Velcaran," Nuri corrected gently. "And yes, I would be honored to teach you. But first you must practice the proper mouth sounds. Our language uses tones that human throats find difficult. As Wu Sung attempted to mimic Velcaran pronunciation sounds, the adults continued their discussion about the medical breakthrough. The implications went far beyond one successful treatment. It suggested that human and Velcaran biology might be more compatible than anyone had imagined. "We should document everything," Hyun-woo said. "This could be the foundation for a new field of interspecies medicine." Hye-jin was already taking notes. "The agricultural applications alone could benefit both our peoples," she said. "If we can understand why the chemistry works, we might be able to develop better treatments for other conditions." Nuri listened to their excitement with growing amazement. These humans were not thinking about how to profit from the discovery. They were not considering how to use it as a weapon against her people. They simply wanted to understand and help others. "Your people truly are strange," she told them. "Velcarans would have immediately classified such knowledge as a military secret. You want to share it freely?" Hyun-woo shrugged. "Medical knowledge belongs to everyone who needs it," he said. "Disease does not care about politics or species boundaries." Over the following days, Nuri observed more examples of human cooperation and generosity. She watched Seok-jin Han repair equipment for other colonists without being asked. She saw Da-un Choi volunteer to work extra shifts when someone was sick. She noticed how the entire community came together to solve problems. The behavior patterns were completely unlike anything in Velcaran society. Her people valued individual strength and independence above all else. The idea of helping others without expecting something in return was considered weakness. Yet these humans had built a thriving colony through cooperation and mutual support. "We may have been wrong about your species," Nuri admitted to Hyun-woo during one of their evening conversations. "We assumed that cooperation meant weakness. We did not understand it could be a source of strength." Hyun-woo was tending the small herb garden he had started in the medical bay. The plants would provide natural ingredients for future treatments. "Every species has different strengths," he said. "Maybe we can learn from each other instead of fighting." Nuri watched him work with the healing plants. "The Velcaran Council would not agree with that assessment," she said. "We have been at war for so long that peace seems impossible." "Peace always seems impossible until it happens," Hyun-woo replied. "Maybe someone needs to take the first step." That night, Nuri could not sleep. She stood at the large windows of the medical facility looking up at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights was her homeworld, her people, her duty as a military officer. But here on this small human colony, she had discovered something unexpected. She had found beings who would risk their lives to help strangers, who would share their knowledge freely, who would treat former enemies as friends. Her daughter would have loved these humans, Nuri realized. The child had always been curious about other species, despite the official hostility. She had once asked why different peoples could not be friends instead of enemies. Nuri had given her the standard answer about Velcaran superiority, but the question had stayed with her. Now she understood that her daughter had been wiser than her elders. There was no real reason for the long, cold war between humans and Velcarans except pride and old grievances. These humans had shown her that cooperation was possible, that trust could exist between different species. The question was what to do with that knowledge. In a few days, her rescue ships would arrive. She would have to decide whether to report what she had learned or keep it secret, whether to maintain the old hostilities or work toward something new. As she watched the stars wheel overhead, Nuri began to think about how she might explain human compassion to her own people. It would not be easy, but perhaps it was worth trying. Perhaps her daughter's dream of friendship between species was not impossible after all. The first step would be the hardest, but maybe that was what courage really meant. Not the strength to fight enemies, but the wisdom to turn them into friends. The Velkaran rescue fleet appeared in the morning sky like a collection of silver stars. 3 sleek warships descended through the atmosphere with the deadly grace that made their species famous throughout the galaxy. Their arrival sent the human colony into immediate alert status as every defense system came online. Nuri stood on the landing platform watching her people approach. She wore her recovered flight harness, but had insisted on carrying a small bundle of items given to her by the human colonists. Wu Sung's dragon drawing was carefully protected in a sealed container. Haiyan Wu's medical notes were stored on a data crystal. Seeds from Hyajin's garden were preserved in a biostasis unit. Captain Velthara emerged from the lead ship surrounded by a full honor guard of Velkaran warriors. She was an imposing figure even by the standards of her species. Her scales were deep blue-black and scarred from many battles. Her golden eyes burned with barely controlled fury as she surveyed the human colony. Wing Commander Nuri Velthara called out in the formal tones of military protocol. "You will report your status immediately. Have these humans harmed you in any way?" Nuri stepped forward and performed the traditional salute of her rank. "Captain, I am unharmed and in good health. The humans provided medical assistance during my recovery from mineral poisoning." Velthara's expression darkened. Around her, the honor guard shifted nervously. The idea that a proud Velkaran officer would accept help from humans was almost unthinkable. "You allowed these primitives to touch you," she demanded, "to treat you with their crude medicine." "They saved my life," Nuri replied calmly. "Their treatment succeeded where our own medical science would have failed." Haiyan Wu stepped onto the landing platform, followed by Bo Ram Lee and several other colony leaders. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a blade. Everyone knew that the next few minutes would determine whether this meeting ended in diplomacy or violence. "Captain Velthara," Bo Ram said, using the formal greeting protocols that Yun Seo had taught her. "Welcome to Kepler 442c. We are honored by your presence." Velthara looked at the human administrator with open contempt. "You will return our officer immediately," she commanded. "Any debts incurred during her captivity will be settled through proper diplomatic channels." "She was not a captive," Haiyan Wu said quietly. "She was a patient. We helped her because she was sick." The Velkaran captain turned her fierce gaze on the human medic. "You dare to speak to me directly?" she snarled. "Do you not know your place in the order of things?" Before Haiyan Wu could respond, Nuri stepped between them. "Captain, this human is Dr. Haiyan Wu Kim. He is the physician who saved my life using techniques unknown to our medical corps. He deserves your respect, not your anger." Velthara stared at her subordinate in shock. Never in her long military career had she heard a Velkaran officer defend a human. "Wing Commander, you will report to my ship immediately for medical evaluation and debriefing. These creatures have clearly damaged your mind with their primitive treatments." "My mind is clear, Captain," Nuri said firmly. "Clearer than it has been in many years. I have learned things here that our people need to understand." At that moment, Admiral Su Hyun Lim arrived with the human defense fleet. 3 Earth-built cruisers took position in orbit around the planet. The Admiral's shuttle landed on the opposite side of the platform from the Velkaran ships. The 2 military forces faced each other across the small landing area while nervous diplomats tried to prevent an incident. Admiral Lim was a veteran of the border conflicts with the Velkaran Empire. She had expected to find her colonists under siege or worse. Instead, she found what appeared to be a peaceful first contact situation. Her hand rested on her sidearm, but she kept her voice level and professional. "Captain Velthara," she said, "I am Admiral Lim of the Colonial Defense Force. I understand one of your people required emergency medical assistance. I trust our doctors provided adequate care." Velthara looked between the human admiral and her own subordinate. The situation was unlike anything in her military experience. "Your people claim to have helped Wing Commander Nuri," she said suspiciously. "What do you expect in return for this assistance?" Admiral Lim glanced at Yan Wu, who shook his head slightly. "We expect nothing, Captain," the admiral replied. "Our medical personnel helped an injured being. That is what doctors do." This answer seemed to confuse Velthara even more than it had confused Nuri weeks earlier. "Nothing," she repeated. "You want no payment, no territorial concessions, no military intelligence." "Nothing," Admiral Lim confirmed. "Though we would welcome the opportunity to establish formal diplomatic relations between our peoples." Nuri stepped forward again. "Captain, I request permission to address the honor guard and ship crews. What I have learned here concerns the future of our species." Velthara hesitated. Military protocol demanded that she remove her subordinate immediately for proper debriefing. But something in Nuri's voice made her pause. The wing commander had always been one of her most trusted officers. If Nuri claimed to have learned something important, it deserved consideration. "You have 5 minutes," Velthara said finally. Nuri moved to the center of the landing platform, where both human and Velkaran forces could see her clearly. When she spoke, her voice carried the formal cadences of a military briefing, but her words were unlike anything the warriors had ever heard. "Fellow Velkarans," she began, "I stand before you alive because these humans chose compassion over suspicion. They risked their lives to help a stranger from a hostile species. They shared their knowledge freely. They asked for nothing in return." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the Velkaran honor guard. Such behavior was incomprehensible by their cultural standards. "For weeks I lived among these humans," Nuri continued. "I observed their customs. I learned their ways. They are not the primitive weaklings we believed them to be. They are strong in ways we never understood." Velthara stepped forward. "Wing Commander, you will cease this propaganda immediately." "It is not propaganda, Captain," Nuri replied. "It is truth. The medicine that saved my life was based on principles our own doctors had forgotten. The cooperation that built this colony demonstrates strength our people have rejected. We have been wrong about humanity." She reached into her bundle and pulled out the drawing that Wusung had made. The simple paper artwork looked fragile in her massive claws, but she held it as carefully as a precious jewel. "A human child gave me this," she said. "He asked for nothing in return. He simply wanted to make a friend. When did our people become so proud that we could not learn from the innocence of a child?" Velthara looked at the crude drawing and then at the faces of the humans gathered on the platform. She saw no deception there, no hidden agenda. Only genuine concern for her subordinate's welfare. "What are you proposing, Wing Commander?" she asked quietly. "I am proposing that we end this pointless Cold War," Nuri said. "I am proposing that we learn from each other instead of fearing each other. I am proposing that we honor the memory of all those who died fighting by ensuring that their children can live in peace." The landing platform fell silent, except for the distant hum of ship engines. Two fleets faced each other across a gap that had seemed unbridgeable just hours before. The decision made in the next few moments would shape the future of both species. Admiral Lim stepped forward slowly. "Captain Velthara," she said, "the human government has authorized me to begin preliminary peace negotiations if your people are interested. We could start with simple agreements, medical cooperation, scientific exchange, small steps toward understanding." Velthara looked at her subordinate, who had become something more than a rescued officer. Nuri had become a bridge between worlds, a living example that cooperation was possible. "Wing Commander Nuri," Velthara said formally, "I am reassigning you to permanent diplomatic duties. You will serve as our first cultural exchange ambassador to the human colonies." Nuri bowed deeply. "I am honored to accept this assignment, Captain." Hyunwoo felt a smile spreading across his tired face. The simple act of giving cold syrup to a sick alien during a storm had somehow grown into something that might change the galaxy. His grandmother would have been proud. As the two fleets began the delicate process of establishing formal contact, little Woo Sung ran onto the platform and hugged Nuri's massive leg. "Does this mean you can stay and teach me more dragon words?" he asked. Nuri looked down at the child who had shown her that friendship could exist between any beings willing to try. "Yes, little star friend," she said. "I can stay. And there is much we can teach each other." The sun set over Kepler 442c, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. On the landing platform, humans and Velkarons stood together for the first time in decades. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning. Sometimes the most important changes in the universe started with the simplest acts of kindness. Sometimes giving medicine to a stranger during a storm could end a war and begin a friendship that would last among the stars forever.